This conference will now be recorded.
And then what I'll be able to do is once we finish the sessions, it does take a little bit of time for it to format itself, but then I can post it out there. So if there was something that you needed to go over again, I do occasionally show some online Excel examples. So if you need to do that to be able to do your homework, you can see some of that. Okay, so I'll 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 put an announcement out there where it's posted once I get that set up. Okay, so my name is Sharon Cook. I'm an associate professor at Ivy Tech for math. I also work with our education department here, so I'm the program chair also for education. So if anyone's interested in eventually going into either elementary or secondary education, I would be the person to talk to in the Lake County campus. So first thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through our syllabus where everything is located because there's quite a lot of different components to this course. And the one thing you want to keep in mind is don't get behind. That's the biggest thing that I'm going to remind everyone about is don't get behind because I do have some due dates. And when those due dates hit, you're not able to get back into the homework assignments to be able to do them. So you want to be really careful with those and keep up with everything. Okay, so first things first, this is our landing page when you go into Ivy Learn. You get to see this. This is our home page. If you scroll down here, you can see we've broken things up into 8 modules. Sometimes we have classes offered in 8-week sessions. Some time we have 16-week sessions. We are a 16-week session, so we will take 2 weeks to go through each module. So module 1 is where we're going to begin. So for this week and next week, even though next week is considered a holiday for us, it's Martin Luther King Day, that's our module 1. So what I'm going to do for next week, since we're going to be missing a session, I'm going to post a recording that I've previously recorded from one of my classes from last semester, going over section 3 of the section 3 material there. So you'll have my version to listen to, and you'll also have some additional videos that I'll be showing shortly. Okay, if during the while I'm talking here you have a question, feel free to unmute your microphone and just stop me, or you can write a question in the chat box. Sometimes I have to be honest, I forget to look at the chat box because I get going. So it's probably easier if you have a dying question, just stop me as we're going along. I'm fine with that. Okay. All right, so this is, like I said, this is your landing page. You can click on some of these modules. It's going to take you to the materials. Now, I'm logged in as a student because if I logged in as myself, the whole thing would look a little bit differently. But you can see everything is grouped according to modules. In each module, we have learning activities, which are the sections from the book, and we'll be talking about that. So here are the sections from the book. We also have videos. So we have videos, and a lot of people ask, is it me on the video? No, it's actually my friend Becky, and she goes through every single problem in the sections. I don't have enough time since I only have an hour time, so I try to go through the most important things that you're going to be encountered on the quizzes and the exams, but she actually goes in more detail. And you can see things are broken up into little sections. So it's not just one giant video for each section. It goes in like little snippets. So if I only need to know something about age dependency ratios, which we'll talk about today, that's the only section you need to talk about and read. And so you click on that. And when we click on this, we're going to go to Becky's video. I'm just going to show you. And you can see she talks about it. She actually writes on here, okay, and how she found these answers. Okay, so it's actually quite beneficial to be going through and watching the videos here. At the end of module 1, you will have a quiz over sections 1 through 3. And notice you are allowed 2 attempts on this quiz before the due date. So it's available until January 28th. That means once that time frame, January 28th, hits, and remember, we are in the central time zone, and unfortunately, everything here is listed as Indianapolis time. So everything for the central time people, it's always due an hour earlier. So keep that in mind. Okay, that's listed somewhere in there. This is a default setting, and I just have difficulty trying to set it back. So just keep that in mind. You have 2 attempts. The higher score is going to be counted. So take advantage of that. I have a lot of people who just wait till the last minute, only barely get to finish the first attempt, and it's not maybe a good grade, but then that's it. I mean, that counts as your score. So take advantage of that. Take it, look at the material, take the first quiz. What did I get wrong? What do I need to go back and study? And then you can go back over that again. Okay, so and that's to your advantage there. All right, and then you can see here's the rest of the modules listed in here. Occasionally, we do have some homework assignments that include Excel, but I will be doing some demonstrations online here, so you can rewatch those. There's also directions in the book. And actually, I'll be following the directions step by step in the book, so you can see how easy it is to go along and watch me doing them. Okay, and if ever you have a question about anything, homework assignment or whatever, shoot me an email, and I usually have my phone with me, and I try to get back to people as quickly as possible. All right, so speaking about homework, if you look over here on the side, what do you have to do? So here's a list of things that are coming up, things that you need to do. So attendance is attending this session. Now, I know some of our students in the past have just logged in and walked away from their computer forever, and then at the end, I could tell that they're no longer here. They just kind of walked away. So occasionally during the session, I'm going to be asking you to check in, or I'll ask a question and everybody to put in their answer, just to make sure that we're all paying attention, that we're all with us here today. Okay, and then that's how I'll make sure I can count everyone for attendance then. All right, there are discussion boards. I see that there were some people that already started our discussion, which is introductions. We have our homework through an online program called WebWorks. The first section is just an orientation. I'm going to click on that, and that's going to actually take us to that section here. And basically, this orientation, you're going to have to log into it. I'm not logged into it as a student. That's why it's telling me it's failed. But you're going to go into that. Maybe if I got cut through assignments here, if I go this way, it might pull it up for me. Yeah, I'm not logged in as a student right now. It knows that I'm an instructor. But once you click on these, you have to log into it. And once you get into it, there's a direct link right into the system here. So in a little bit, I'll get out of the student version and I'll show you what it's like when I get into it for myself. But it'll take you directly to the homeworks. Orientation is just showing you how to properly enter answers. That's what it's all about, because that's one of the biggest things, is making sure that you enter the answers correctly. Sometimes it's a little bit fussy with how it wants the answers there. Okay, let me see. So we know about quizzes. I'm going to click on quizzes here. Okay, so not only do we have under the quiz section here, the module quizzes are over the sections of the homework, but we also have our exams listed under here. So exams are proctored, and notice I only have due dates for a few of these things. So I've only set up Unit 1 material due dates. So we have 3 different units in this book here. I've only set up Unit 1 due dates to make sure we're staying on track. So once we get a little bit further along, I'll be adding more due dates to that. But feel free, you can most likely work ahead. There's no issues working ahead. Okay, if I go back under assignments, it's going to give me a list of everything. Right now it's listing everything according to due date here, so it's listing it in the order. Okay, and notice there's something here, review quiz for exam number 1. These are required quizzes. Okay, they're actually a separate grade for these review quizzes. So it actually takes you to a separate website here, and then you can click the link and you can begin taking the quiz. Now, the nice thing about this, I'm going to click on this. Oh, because it's logged in as a student, darn it. Okay, that's because I'm in as a student again. But once you log into it, it'll take you to there. So notice I have this due by February 16th. You can take this review quiz over and over again. It is a timed quiz, so it helps keep pace with everything, because when you take your exams, the exams are timed. All right, so the first 2 exams will be 90 minutes, and the final exam you will get 120 minutes. All right, so, and it is an online exam. Sometimes you're going to have a multiple choice question. Sometimes you're going to be having a question where you have to type the sentence in to explain the answer. You also are going to be writing on scratch paper at the Proctor Center, and they actually will collect that and scan it and email it to me. So when I'm grading your exams, I look at literally every single problem of everyone to make sure that there's no issues with formatting, like maybe the test was real particular and they wanted 10.0 and you just put in the answer of 10 and it marked it wrong. So I won't mark anything like that where it's a formatting error, so you don't have to worry about that. But I do look at your work because I can give you partial credit if you were on the right track and maybe you just threw something into your calculator wrong or had it reversed or something like that. So when you are going to be taking your first exam, and I'll remind you, make sure you write legibly and you tell me which work goes with which problem there. Make sure they're numbered there. Okay, so review quiz 1, I guarantee that if you do well on the quiz, those students who seem to have been doing well on the exam quiz have been doing well on the exam itself. They're pretty much almost the same grade, like within a few percentage points, just 1 or 2 percentage points up or down. So they're very, very similar grades once you practice that. So please take advantage of that. Okay. Obviously, you've looked at the announcements. I also sent an email out to get into the session, so everyone was successful. So just kind of keep an eye out for these announcements. Occasionally, I might be out of town or something, and if I am, for some reason, I'll let you know if I'm not able to do it. If for some reason I'm not able to be on the live session, I will record it and post it out there in the future. So I won't actually miss a session, but it might not be the live session that we have. Okay. So, that's like next week for Martin Luther King Day. We don't actually meet because it's considered a holiday, but I'll post a recording out there. All righty. One other thing, I'm going to start leaving student view so I can show you a couple things. If you have just recently signed up for your classes and you have not had an opportunity to pay for your classes or set up a payment plan, make sure you do that immediately, because they will, I don't know what date it is exactly, but there is a date that they drop people for non-payment. And then what happens is you get taken out of all your classes, so you no longer have access to the programs for homework and things like that. So you want to make sure, if you haven't had the opportunity to do so, at the very least, make a payment plan. Okay, and double check with all that if you need to do that. So I'm going to go back to assignments. I got myself out of the student view, and I want to make sure, because I know I was playing with this the other day. So let's see if I go through WebWorks number 2. This is what it would look like for you when you have something like this. So homework session 2 is going to show up. This isn't the problem. This isn't all the problems. So you're going to want to scroll down. Okay, notice the sections sometimes have a lot of problems here. All right. And keep scrolling down, and here are the videos attached to this section also, which makes it really convenient. So once again, if there's a problem with age dependency and you can't remember how to do that, you can click over here to this link and it's going to take you to that video that I had pulled up earlier there. So let's just take a look at a problem. What does it look like? Okay, so here's one where we have to, enter the answer as a decimal. Okay, you can check your answer. Some of them, you're only allowed to answer them so many times. Some of them, after you've answered it a couple of times, it'll give you a new problem because it'll show you like a little video to help you review. Okay, the one thing I am asking, for some reason, the link where it says, email instructor and try to forward this to your instructor, it just hasn't been working as of lately. So what I do ask is, if there's a question that you are having issues with and you've tried a number of times to do this, you've looked in your book and all that, and you're still having issues, take a screenshot of this. If you're using a mobile device, I think everybody knows how to take a picture on their mobile device. If you're on a keyboard, you can hit Control button, and then there's actually a button, Print Screen, and you can send me the screenshot. A lot of times I am on my phone out over the area, and I really can't pull up the program, but I can see the problem if you screenshot it to me. So if you do that, then I'm able to look at it, give you some hints, or a lot of times it's just a format error. So, I can say, oh, they're asking for it in this format, and this is how you should put your answer. Okay, so keep an eye on that and how you do that. Going back to assignments here, I'll go back to that practice quiz link again. Oh, these are down. Where did I have them? Oh, I think it's a little further down. Here we go. Review quiz for exam 1. Okay, so it says I'm going to click on this link, and you can see it takes me right to this. So remember, this is a timed, you have 75 minutes. There are 20 questions for you to answer, and it's worth 100 points. You can just keep doing this over and over again until you get a good grade. Now, what's really nice about this is you're going to know where you're having issues. So maybe you've gotten everything correct except ratios. You're just having difficulty on ratios. So if that's the thing you're having difficulties with, that's what you're going to put a little bit more attention when you're studying for the exam there. Okay. Oop, I forget. This takes me to another website, so I have to hit the back arrow to get back to our session here. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the syllabus, the parts of the syllabus, which will explain everything. I haven't actually posted my office hours yet because I just figured out what my schedule is, so that will be updated sometime later today. Okay, if you have any technical support, here's what you want to refer to. Okay, if for some reason you are a student that has had any sort of accommodations in the past, you'll have to go through the disability services. They send me the official paperwork. I'm not allowed to give any accommodations unless I get official paperwork. So I always make sure people know that that's out there. You should have gotten a copy of the text sent to your house. If you didn't get it sent to your house and you registered for this quite a while ago, it's because you haven't updated your contact information. So you might have an old address listed. That means it got sent to the old address. So here's where you're going to need to either email or call for any sort of issues with the textbook. Okay. You can click on to review the policies. So a lot of this you can just look through. I do highly recommend that you use a headset. That's what I use here. It is a little bit easier, kind of drowns out some of the things in the background, and it's a little bit easier to talk and listen when somebody has a headset, but whatever is working for you. Now, our grades, we don't use the point system in here. So we don't total up all the points and divide by how many we have. We use percentages. So we use a weighted grading. And actually, one of our sessions that we're going to go over is how to calculate a weighted grade. So you can see that we're going to be having 3 exams in this class because we have 3 different units. So they're worth 20, 20, and the last exam is worth 25%. And the reason why the last one is a little bit more is because the last exam is going to have a little bit of review material in addition to Unit 3 materials. So that's why that's worth a little bit more. Homework is worth 10%. The discussion boards are worth 5%, which includes our attendance here. 5% can throw you 1 grade or another. So if you're like right on the borderline and you've been attending all your sessions and you've been doing all your discussion boards, most likely that'll help you tip to the higher grade. We are going to be having 2 projects during the semester, and they're a total of 10%. In other words, each one is worth 5%. And then our quizzes are worth 10% here. We just use the simple 90, 80, 70 grading scale. If you do intend on transferring to another school or a 4-year institution, you do have to get at least a 70%. You do have to get at least a C to be able to transfer to another college. So that's requirements. That's the general requirements out there. So I do have due dates and deadlines set up out there. Remember that sometimes where it says, it's due by, if you don't submit it in time, the link disappears and you cannot submit it. So remember, everything is due an hour before it says. So if you're waiting until the last minute to do that, which I do not recommend, you could run into that issue. So be careful with that. Okay, makeup policies, and I'm pretty strict on the makeup policies here. If I don't see something submitted on time, it will be a 0 unless you have some sort of documentation, okay? Now, if you know ahead of time, because a lot of times the spring semester, a lot of people are parents that attend this session, and you might have children that are on spring break that's not the same as ours, and you might be going out of town or whatever. Let me know ahead of time. We could work around that. Definitely we can figure that out. And remember, you can always work ahead on your homework assignments. So I'm happy to work ahead or work things out if you let me know ahead of time. And I do know that occasionally things do happen, but if for some reason you get sick at the last minute, you'll have to send me some sort of official documentation with the date and all that on there, okay? If there is an outage with Ivy Learn, we get notification if something's wrong with Ivy Learn or with the WebWorks, the homework assignments there on WebWorks. So if for some reason it's that fault, then I will extend the homework assignments, no problem. But saying that you don't have a computer that you could have worked on the weekend before something is due, or your computer crashed, is not a valid excuse. Unfortunately, everyone's computer crashes an hour before homework is due. Okay, so be careful with that. All right, you want to make sure that you don't get dropped from class, so you want to make sure that you do some homework assignments. Okay, here's our date for making sure that you're doing homework assignments by the due date. We just have Equal Opportunity and Education Act. If there's any issues, please let me know or go into the reporting. Okay, am I required to come to campus? Basically, the only time you need to come to campus is to take the exam. Now, if you take it at a testing center at one of the Ivy Tech sites, then there's no charge for you. If you're not able to make it because of wherever you're located, or because of your job hours, and you need to take it another time, we have something that we pair with, and that's called ProctorU. So here's information on proctored exams. Okay. Like I said, I'd say 95% or more take it at an Ivy Tech site. They'll set up their exam time. I haven't submitted the exams to the Proctor Center yet, so maybe starting in a week or so, you can start scheduling yourself once they get it in the system there. If you're not able to, or for some reason you miss your appointment time, your only other option is to use ProctorU. Now, using ProctorU, you do have to have a computer that does have a web camera, because they actually log in and there's somebody online with you, and they literally, it's just somebody sitting on the computer watching you take the exam. So when they, so it's a little bit different. There is a fee for this. I want to say it's around $15, but I could be wrong. So, but if you don't have any other options, this is a great option. And we've had great success with this, because I've had people who've been out of the country and taken it through this and had no issues. All right, if for some reason life is getting in the way and you're no longer able to just complete this class, and believe me, I've done this myself when I was going to college, sometimes it's just overwhelming, you need to officially withdraw from the class by Saturday, April 13th. If you don't officially withdraw, then I have to submit a grade. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, because, I mean, we all know sometimes life gets in the way. Okay, and then just keep in mind online communication etiquette. I will try to get to you within 36 hours. I'm usually much quicker on that, which drives my husband kind of nuts. But like I said, if you send me a screenshot of something, I'll try to help you as soon as I possibly can. Okay. I will be posting things in the announcements section. So I do believe you also get an email on that there is an announcement out there, but check it often. Okay. How is my grade calculated? Okay, so we're going to have the discussion boards, the quizzes, the homework, the projects. Okay. We do require some written work that goes along with the projects. So when you are doing that, they'll say a minimum of 1 page. Well, please don't adjust the margins and adjust the font so that it's going to look like it filled up 1 page, because I know this is a trick that everybody does. Here's what we're saying. It's basically the default setting. So if you call up a Word document, whatever the default setting is usually going to be just fine. We do use APA format for citing any reference. And if you pull up a Word document, there's actually a little part on there that allows you to just put in your APA references. So if you've had an English class, I'm sure they've showed you that already. Okay, we do have questions that you answer, and I'll be going through this. So as long as you're answering the questions, you're going to fill a page, no problem. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, and here that talks about students will be allowed to complete exams 1 and 2 for 90 minutes and 120 minutes for exam 3. And then here are the due dates that I've set so far. Mostly this is for Unit 1 material, you can see, and there's a lot of other activities down here. I just haven't set due dates on these yet. Okay, so if you're just kind of glancing at some of this, when we're looking at this, you can see there's quite a bit of things to do each week, and you do not want to wait until the night that something is due to try to start working on it, because you will run out of time. Once the time is up, it just cuts you off, and that's it. So whatever you entered up into that point, as long as you've been saving it as you've been going along, that's all that'll count towards your grade. So please keep that in mind and be careful with that. Okay. Alrighty, so that is all from our syllabus. So I'm going to take you through the parts of our textbook right now, because our textbook is a little bit different than what you're used to. It looks like a giant workbook. And it is intended to look like a giant workbook because Confucius said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. Okay, so we actually want you to go through the action of writing these things down, thinking about these, reasoning some of these out, all right, because this is what's going to help you remember and understand how to do these things. Okay, so these are meant for you to write in. We don't resell these. So these are yours. Take all the notes that you need in here. If you have to miss class occasionally, I will have the recordings posted out there so you can watch the recording. Unfortunately, you would not get points for the attendance. Okay. So can I return or sell it if you've opened the packet? Unfortunately, we can't. So that's how this book works. All right, so our book is divided into sections. You'll notice here. There's the discover, connect, explore, prepare, practice, and excel. All right, so we've done these purposefully. Discover means anytime we're going to be introducing a new topic. So that's going to be under the discover section. Connect is where, okay, after we've gone through maybe the basic definitions or the basic algorithms, now we're going to start applying it to some problems here. So that's going to be where the connect comes in. Explore are a little bit more in-depth problems. Occasionally, I do get to some explore problems, but mostly I'm typically going through the discover and the connect phase here. All right, so that's what I'll mostly be covering in our sessions. Prepare, there's a few sections that actually have prepare listed in there, and that's where it kind of refreshes your memory on a basic skill. So there might be something in here like, here's a reminder on how to convert a fraction to a decimal to a percent. So that would be like a prepare section. All right, practice. There's practice problems at the end of every section. I do not go over these in class because I save the practice problems. So if you want to come see me during office hours, this is what we can work on together. Also, if you're going to be going to any of our tutoring centers, this is a great way for you to work with the tutors and practice with them. So I don't do these in our sessions here. And then occasionally we will have some Excel. Now, I don't want you to get worried if you've never used Excel, because we are going to be doing some super basic functions. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how Excel can be used as kind of like a fancy calculator. And I'm going to literally take you from the very beginning. We're going to use very basic functions. So if you already know Excel, please kind of put yourself back a little bit and do the way that we're doing it in class. All right, so if you've never used it before, you might be a little nervous in the beginning, but don't worry, you'll catch on pretty quick. Okay. All right, one other thing I'd like to point out, I am actually one of the authors of this textbook. So we've been updating it regularly. Some of the chapters, I've actually written a few of these chapters in here. So if you have any questions, maybe why something is the way it is. We do have a crew, you can see here that we do try to update things from semester to semester. Occasionally we do find a few errors here and there or a link that doesn't work, but we try our best to make sure that this is all up to date. Okay, so section 1 you can pretty much look at on your own. It just kind of talks about what exactly is quantitative reasoning. We're going to be primarily focusing on the thinking aspect with our numbers in here. So we're not going to be a class where it's just going to be do a calculation, get an answer, we're done. We're going to actually say, what does this number mean? How can we use this, or how can we express this number in another way? Why would I need to know this number? You know how you've taken a math class before and you've always questioned yourself, where am I ever going to use this in life? This class is all about it. So this class, every time we've got a topic, we try to show you how this is used in real life so that you get some real life practical experience on a lot of these topics here. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you to just finish, going through section 1. There's no homework associated with section 1. It just talks about things. When you get to the part where you're going to be doing reports, please remember what plagiarism is. It's copying someone else's work or ideas without giving them credit. So if you have to use a cite, make sure you use the proper APA citation. Okay, so just go ahead and look through it, just basically kind of showing how we look at data graphically in many different ways, how we can solve some word problems. The biggest part is really understanding the problem. You can make little notes. I am a very visual learner, so I like to sometimes draw pictures that'll help me solve problems or write things down to be able to carry out the plan. You definitely want to have yourself a scientific calculator. Those are not very expensive. Those aren't those fancy $100 calculators. A scientific calculator is only, it's probably around $10, $12 at the most. I got mine at Target for like $8. And so you want to use that because those are the only ones that you are allowed on the exam. They don't actually even allow you to use a graphing calculator, which are those fancy ones. Okay. All right, so here's some rules for rounding. We are going to be rounding some numbers here. So I know Becky has a video on some of these, but you can just kind of look over this section 1. So what I'm going to get into with the remaining time that we have here is just a quickie review on ratios and then how we might be using ratios in real life. So I am starting with section 2. Okay. A ratio is basically a comparison of the relative size of two quantities. So what I always like to tell my students is, it's a way of comparing something like, 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. Ratios we use all the time. If you've ever gone to the grocery store and you looked at the little price tags that are on those little shelves over there, usually on the right-hand side, either upper or lower corner, they show something which is a unit price. Okay, a unit price, it's actually it's a ratio and it shows the cost per one item. So let's take a look at like a typical grocery item here. What would be the better deal? Should I get these cans here that a 3 flavored pack? There I get $9.99 for 18 cans. Okay, so if I divide that out, it winds up to be 56 cents a can. Or in this case, should I buy the 8 flavor pack for $12.50, but I get 24 cans, which is going to be the better deal? Okay, so actually, when we figure out per one, and how would we do that? We would actually just take this ratio. So it is price per number of units. Okay, so that's what the unit price is. So I would take $9.99 divided by 18. Okay, and whatever my answer is in the form of a decimal, after I've divided, my ratio is always per one of whatever that denominator was. Okay, so you can see that it's actually a better deal to get the larger one. Now be careful in the grocery stores, sometimes it's not the better deal to get the bigger one. And that's where it's a good thing, to be able to look at those unit prices that they post there, or to calculate it yourself. Okay. Does the order of division matter when setting up a ratio? It sure does. All right. And what's really nice about a ratio is when you're reading something or you're trying to reason through something, they will give you the order of which to look at it. So when it says here, calculating the price per can, okay, since price is listed first, that's going to be in the numerator. Per is another key word that represents division, and then can would be in the denominator. So when we looked over here, we were doing basically price per cans, okay? And so that's why you can see that we set it up that way. Okay, so remember, what is it? It's a relative comparison of two sizes. There are a number of ways that we will do this. Okay, sometimes when we are setting up a ratio, we'll use a colon in between. So in this case, this is a 3:2 ratio. Sometimes we'll actually use the word 2 in there. Most of the time, you're going to see something written as, per. All right, so remember price per can. Per means to divide. Or we'll have it in the, once we divide it out, we'll list it as a decimal. Now this decimal means, since I have 1.5 here, it means 1.5 per one of whatever that denominator is. Okay, so here's a few different ways of writing them. And we can say that I have a 12 to 15. We can put them in reduced form, reduced to the lowest factors here. Here it is written in the form of a fraction. Now to put it in decimal form, I would take numerator divided by the denominator, and I would get my decimal here, 0.8. So that means 0.8 per one of whatever that denominator is. Okay, so if we look over here at this page, notice here's some different ratios and they're comparing things. So 9 inches to 3 feet. We have to be careful when we're looking at ratios that don't have the same units here. So in order to compare these fairly, we need to make sure that they have the same units. Otherwise, it's an unfair comparison. So watch out for these, especially with Section 2 homework. They might try to trick you on a few of these. Don't just look at numbers. Also pay attention to the units there. So if I really paid attention to all the units, this is what I would find inside there. So I'll give you just a moment to write some of these down while I double check all the attendance here. Okay, another quick review here. Here's something now. This would be connect. Now that we know how to set up a ratio, how am I going to use this in real life? Well, let's take a look. Jane makes $10.50 an hour. Lee makes $12 an hour. Can we write the ratio of what Jane earns per hour to what Lee earns per hour? Now, notice I underlined this part here. It's telling us the order it wants us to compare these two items here. So what it's saying is the first item is Jane's per hour. So that's $10.50 is in my numerator, divided by, because it says per hour, to what Lee makes, and he makes $12 an hour. So this is $10.50 divided by 12. Now you can reduce it to lowest terms in the form of a fraction, but what we do most of the time is we just divide it out and get a decimal equivalent. Okay, so we get this number here. This means this many per one of the denominator. So the denominator is what Lee makes an hour, right? So if it's 0.875, if I were to explain what that means, it means that Jane makes only, if I convert this to a percent, in other words, multiply my decimal by 100, she makes only 87.5% of what Lee does. Or another way of looking at it, if I just keep it in the form of a decimal, she makes about, if I rounded this out to money, she makes about 88 cents for every $1 that he makes. Remember, because this is per one of the denominator. Okay, so you can say it either way, but that's basically what that means there. Okay. Now, you can go ahead and look at some of the other items listed. Recipes are one of the big areas we look at. So for scaling up recipes here, if it calls for 2 cups of milk and 3 cups of pancake mix, what is the ratio of a pancake mix to milk? Okay, remember we're paying attention. Pancake mix was 3-to-2 ratio. Okay, so this feeds 4. Can we scale up to 16? Well, how do I go from 4 to 16? I would basically multiply by 4, right? So if I take this and multiply by 4, I get 12. If I take 2, multiply by 4, I get 8. So recipes are the biggest way that we adjust ratios here. Now look at it saying, explain what happens to the units here. Well, the units are all, in this case, they're pretty much canceling out, okay? A ratio is the same regardless of units used, okay? So it doesn't matter if, even if we adjust it up for 16 people, we're still looking at cups, and the cups would cancel each other out. Here's another way of comparing apples to oranges. So it's in this order. So we would have apples in the numerator, oranges in the denominator. We can reduce that fraction to lowest terms, which would be 1.5 as a decimal because we take numerator, divide it by the denominator. What does this mean? Remember, it's so many of the numerator per one of the denominator. So there are 1.5 or 1.5 apples for every 1 orange. Okay, and then you can take a look at the ones with the dog treats and the students here. Notice these last two, they worded it in a different way. And when it's worded in a different way, you get a different answer because there's a comparison in a different manner. So take just a moment to write those down. Okay, another way we can use ratios. There are 6.6 million people in Indiana, and the area of Indiana is 35,826 square miles. What is the ratio of Hoosiers to square miles? Okay, here's the number of Hoosiers. I wrote it out as a long standard form here. Divide it by the square miles. And so this rounds out to approximately 184. So what does that mean? If we were to divide all the population of Indiana up evenly throughout the whole state, there's going to be about 184 people per square mile. That's what that means. Okay. So I know I talked about different kinds of ratios, but everything we've shown so far has been a part-to-part ratio. Okay, all ratios are seen in this lesson have been part to part, but sometimes we're going to be comparing something to the whole giant group. When we do that, that is what we call a part to whole ratio. So you definitely want to know the difference between the two. What's a part to part? What's a part to whole? So let's take a look at this example here. So in a class of 26 students where 16 are men and 10 are women, the ratio of men to all students is, so now look at how this ratio is written, men to all students. So men is first, so that's going to be 16 is my first number, and that's going to be divided by 26 to all students. Okay, so if I divide that out, I'm going to get 0.615. I can convert this to a percent. Now, note over here, a part to whole ratio is the only type that can be put in the form of a percent. And the reason why is because we're comparing a part out of the whole thing, which is another definition for a percent. Okay, so in this case, if I get the decimal, multiply it by 100, I get 61.5%. So 61.5% of the class is male. And if I want to find out the female ratio, okay, I can either take 100% minus this, and it would give me the female percentage, or I could set up the ratio again. So what's the ratio of women to the whole class? So women was 10 out of 26. Okay, this is a part to whole, once again, because the part is the women out of the entire class. And we're going to get 38.5%. Now, if I add this number and the men's number, they should total 100%. Okay. Looking ahead to some other numbers here, another way that we use ratios, okay, and this kind of is interesting because economically speaking, we can compare different countries and we can understand about some of the other countries when we look at their age dependency ratios. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, when we look at the table, this is giving us, and this is from the U.S. Census Bureau. So anytime you're going to be seeing data displayed, this is going to be real. We don't make up numbers here. The data we get from usually government websites, and we will cite the source. This came from the U.S. Census Bureau here. They only do the census every 10 years, so we haven't had the next census yet. So this is the most recent one that we can refer to. Okay, so in this case, notice that we have 3 different groups. We have what we would consider the children. That's anyone 0 to 14 years old. Now, look at these numbers here. Okay, I know in the United States, this is because this is the U.S. Census Bureau, there's more than 62,000 children in the United States. Be careful when you're looking at tables. You always want to look at the information that talks about the table here. Notice it says all of these numbers are in the thousands. So government websites purposefully like to make their numbers more concise. And so what they usually do is they'll show us an abbreviated version of that, and they'll tell us what they mean. So in this case, numbers are in the thousands. That means we would take this number and multiply it by 1,000 to get the actual value. So in other words, multiplying by 1,000 is the same thing as adding 3 more zeros onto that number. Because we know the total population, if I added all these up, of all the ages, we have more than 306,000 people in the United States. But if I add 3 more zeros, which I multiplied by 1,000, 306 million, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So be careful with these when you run into things with your homework here. Okay, watch out for that. Okay, so these are estimates. They're based on the U.S. Census here. Okay, and it talks about this. When it talks about can we calculate the ratio of under 15-year-olds to the total population, okay, so we're going to say the children to the entire population. Okay, so if we're going to be comparing this, it's okay to use the abbreviated form of the number because all of these are abbreviated. Okay, so in this case, so if I take that and divide by the entire population, I get 0.203. Remember, this is a part to whole ratio, so in this case, it would make sense to put it in the form of a percent. So that's the same thing as multiplying this decimal by 100, and I'd have 20.3% of the population is considered a child or under 15 years old. Okay. Now, we have some dependency ratios that we want to make sure you understand. Child dependency ratio is found by dividing the children by the that are under 15 years old by the people who are 15 to 64. Now, the reason why we call this child dependency is because anyone who's the years 15 to 64, that's considered the working class. That's the population, usually the years of the population that make your country economically active. Okay, so that's how we compare it. We're comparing the children who are dependent upon the workers. Okay, so that's not literally dependent, maybe watching them like one-on-one, but their tax dollars also help support programs for them. All right, so that's why we would do that. That is considered a part-to-part ratio because we're comparing two separate parts of that entire population, the children to the workers. Okay, and you can see we get 0.304. In other words, this means about approximately 0.3 children per one worker. So each worker would support about 0.3 of a child. Now, I mean, this is kind of hard to understand, 0.3 of a child. So sometimes we like to convert these numbers, and instead of saying 0.3, what if we multiplied both the numerator and the denominator either by 10 or by 100? Okay, so if I only multiplied it by 10, okay, that would mean what? Moving the decimal over one spot. So that would be 3 per 10 workers. Okay, if I multiplied it by 100, that would be 30 children for every 100 workers. Okay, so sometimes they like to change that up a little bit. Okay, and I just want to go over the definitions for the remaining here. We have old age dependency. Okay, old age dependency is considered anyone 65 or older, okay, divided by the workers. Now remember, that means that these workers are putting in money for Social Security and taxes and all that, and are supporting programs for people who are retired or the senior citizens that are 65 and older. Okay, age dependency, when they don't specifically say child or old age dependency and they just say age dependency, that means anyone who's dependent on workers. So both children and the senior citizens are dependent upon the workers. So we would add the total of the children and the senior citizens, and we would divide by the total amount of workers. Okay. So that represents 0.49. Okay, and what does that mean? Okay, it means that each person who is working is supporting roughly about one person. Okay. Okay, so this, I'm seeing a question coming up. Our sessions are going to last an hour. Occasionally I might go over, but if you have to leave, that I fully understand because some people have a class right after this. I just very quickly went over these definitions because these are the things I want you to concentrate on when you're going through and rewatching some of the videos that are out there. Okay, so you definitely need to understand how to set up a ratio and what does a ratio mean if it's part to part, part to whole, and then the different types of dependency ratios: child dependency, old age dependency, and any age dependency ratio. Okay, so I know I went through these last sections pretty quickly, so I want to make sure that please go back and watch the videos this week on this section. Okay, next week we will not have class Next week is Martin Luther King Day, which is considered a college holiday, also a federal holiday. And I will post Section 3 video out there for you to watch. So it's going to be required that you're going to watch that on your own time there. Okay. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email, but definitely try to do some of the homework to make sure you're logging in okay and you don't have any issues with that. All right. So at this point, you are free to log off. I'll stay on the line in case anyone has any other additional questions. Otherwise, I will talk with you in 2 weeks' time. Yes, there is a way that you can watch this again. What I will be doing is posting this. So I'm going to try to get, sometimes I create a YouTube channel and I give you a link to the YouTube last semester, but some reason they weren't converting correctly. So I'm either going to post a link to the session or I'm going to put them in a YouTube channel and I'll give you the link. But it probably won't be till the end of the day because it does take a little while for it to format the saving it. But you can watch this over and over again. What we are looking at is pretty much the same that's in the textbook. There might be something a little bit different, but yes, it should be the same as the textbook. No, there's no homework due tonight. The only thing that was due today was the attendance. In other words, attending the session. That was it. So if you have attended, you've hit the mark. Now, I would definitely give you some time to look at the homework. I don't post the answers for all of these here, but if you watch Becky's videos, she'll have the answers posted for the things in the book. Okay, and I only will go through some of these in class, unfortunately, because we're usually pretty pressed for time on these. Yeah, it will show you online what chapters to go over in the book. So when you go to your Ivy Learn page, we are in Module 1. So Module 1 is this week. So it's divided. So we do one module every other week. So Module 1 lasts for 2 weeks. Module 2 then will be weeks 3 and 4 and so on. And you can just go to the module and it'll say what sections are in there. Okay, any other questions out there that I can help you with? Okay, so if you have no other questions, you're free to log off. I'm just making sure that I stay on enough in case someone has a question. Okay, so I'm going to be officially logging off. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me.